So take it away, Kelly.
Hey guys, I'm Kelly. I'm an alcoholic. I'm sober through God's grace, some dumb luck, and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. What an awesome conference this has been. I really got a lot out of Glenn and Jimmy. I heard a little bit of Mickey, or Mikey, but those two I really resonated with a lot. And it's an honor and a privilege to get asked to do anything for Alcoholics Anonymous. When I ask God to use me, my prayers, I get asked to do a lot of stuff like this, and it still blows my mind. I heard Glenn talking about, is it odd or is it God? And that was one of my favorite things. It was one of the most spiritual things, like that I've heard. I can look at that all my days, like in the actions of my days. Looking for God working in my life. I'm one of those people that needed proof. I came here, my sobriety date is September 1st, 1994. And I haven't had a drink in almost 26 years. And that is amazing and spiritual. And I say I stayed sober through a little bit of dumb luck because I did take this gift for granted for a long time. And much like I heard people sharing earlier, I was so blocked with self-will, I was so blocked with self-reliance and fear. And I just wouldn't let you guys help me. Like I thought physical sobriety was enough. I thought that not drinking and not doing drugs and coming to AA meetings occasionally was enough for me to be happy, joyous, and free. And I could not find both of those things at the same time and here until I started to find a power I could rely on. And that didn't happen for a really long time. It was about 17 years sober when I had run out of ideas on how to fix my life. I tried every means to fix me. I exhausted myself trying to fix myself, trying to do everything but AA because it just seemed too simple. I just felt like, my problems are some special kind of problems. I'm a special kind of alcoholic. I have a special set of circumstances, and somehow this magical information. I've fallen in love with the big book, and I've fallen in love with AA in the past 9 years. But I was in love with AA when I first came here. When I got to AA, I did not want to drink anymore. I was so scared. And I knew 100% that I was going to pick up a drink again because I had proven it to myself over and over and over that no matter how hard I tried to stay stopped on my own will, I could not make it. I could make it 2 or 3 days and I would take a drink again. I would change my mind. And it kept getting worse and it kept getting worse and it kept getting worse. And I wanted out, and I just did not know I could not visualize having a life free of booze, free of drugs, free of all chemicals, and be happy about it. I just didn't think the two would coexist. And so when I came to y'all, I was resolved to having a really boring life. And it was not going to be fun anymore. I was never going to have fun. Wasn't going to dance. I wasn't going to have sex. I wasn't going to do anything. Right. I was just going to be a piper of some sort. There was a part of me that at the end of my drinking, I was like, if I have to join my mom's church, maybe those people are right. Everybody kind of hinted on that as they were sharing that the spiritual life was not something that I found very attractive. The people I knew that were religious or spiritual, they felt like, to me, I felt like they had weak character. I felt like they weren't very exciting. They were normal, and I wanted nothing but to be not normal. I always gravitated to subculture and, I remember being, 6, 7 years old and watching a movie with Gary Coleman in it. And he lived in some bus terminal. He lived in a locker at a bus station. And I remember when I was a little kid going, I want to live like that in New York City in a bus terminal station. That looks awesome. And then later on, I came across the punk rock band member Sid Vicious. And there was that Sid and Nancy movie. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to live like that. I was always attracted to anything normal, anything not normal. And it's so funny because I ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous, which I thought I was going to be so bored and so lonely and so, nerdy. And I ended up finding the exact band of misfits that I always craved, my people. It's so funny. the spiritual life, everybody kind of leaned up to it. I could not drink. Booze was my first spiritual experience. And I'll tell you, the first time I got loaded, I knew that I was going to do this for the rest of my life. I was going to do whatever I had to do to get it. I had the obsession with alcohol from the moment I first felt the obsession. For the first time I felt the drink, it was like, I knew the very next weekend I was going to try to find some older people to buy me some alcohol, or I was going to steal my mom's liquor, or I was going to do something that I was going to do this again. And I couldn't wait. And like, I always had the obsession. When I wasn't drinking, I was thinking about drinking. When I was drinking, I was worried about when I was going to run out, and how much the other people were drinking. I was like I was a hoarder. I would steal alcohol from people's parties and put them in my pockets and hide them in my backpack and hide them in the closet at my first apartment, and make sure I had a little stash for myself, because there was never enough, right? And I needed it because it changed the way I felt, and it made my skin fit. It made all my insecurities and all my fears just kind of like melt away. And I didn't really care. It gave me the courage to not care. And I loved alcohol for that. It also gave me the courage to come out and play, because when I was sober, I was super uncomfortable. I think Mickey said that he felt like a fish out of water, kind of laying on a sidewalk, just so uncomfortable. I didn't get the pink cloud stage either in the beginning. My early sobriety was extremely painful. And I really didn't know what you guys were doing here. I just knew that for an hour when I would go to these meetings, I didn't think about drinking, even though people were talking about drinking and their experience with drinking. I felt safe in meetings of AA, and I looked forward to going to the meetings, and I still do. I still love AA, but I didn't do the steps, right? I didn't let people get close to me in AA. I was still so full of self-reliance. I have such huge ego. I didn't know that I had like a grandiose ego, that I can't follow direction, that I can't, I don't take suggestions well. I'm a fighter to the core, to this day. I have to be spiritually fit to back down from somebody coming at me in an aggressive way. I've got to be spiritually fit, and I can back down. I can soften a situation. But up until this point recently, you'd come at me and I'd come back at you just as strong, just as fast, like pop up. My ego was always there to protect me, but then there were this other parts of me that were like, maybe if I take enough LSD, I will have an awakening and get out of this stuck frame of mind that I knew I was in. Like on some level, I knew I was spiritually sick and hurting and suffering, because I felt that anxious apartness from people. I felt like I didn't quite fit anywhere I went. I might have the right mohawk, the right hair, the right clothes, listen to the right music, and be with those people. I still felt like I didn't belong no matter where I was. Until recently, until doing the work that's suggested in Alcoholics Anonymous. My spiritual awakening, my dark night of the soul moment happened when I had 17 years sober. At that point, my sobriety was completely untreated. I'd done a couple fourth steps, but I hadn't actually, I didn't know. I honestly did not know that there was a fourth column in the fourth step. I thought that the fourth step was literally just the resentment column, and like it's drawn out in the book, 3 columns, right? I had never let people get close to me. And because I never got close to people, the first word in the first step is we, because I never let other alcoholics really truly help me, or I was attracted to alcoholics in AA that weren't about the spiritual life necessarily. They were just kind of hanging out in meetings. Nobody really took me through this work. Nobody took me through the book to show me really how vitally important it was for me to get convinced that my life run on my self-will wasn't going to be successful. I came to that conclusion on my own with, trying every means to fix myself that money could buy. I went to lots of psychiatrists. I went to lots of therapists. I love therapy. Psychiatry is great. I don't see any of those people right now, but I do know, and I recalled that as I started getting healthier in AA and actually working steps and being sponsored and finding a relationship with power, that my therapy appointments were a lot of the first 3 column talk. It was never really, what was my part in this situation? And that was the magic. That was the magic turning point for me in AA, is getting around some people that were like, okay, all that's well and good that you're angry at this person. They did this, this, and this. This is what it affected in you, your defects that were aroused in this experience. But where's that part that what did you do? How did you set this ball rolling? That was the magic turning point. And that direction is buried on 66, right? It is, I really needed a sponsor. I really needed a person to walk me through this, to translate what was being told for me to do in an inventory process in here. And the inventory is something that I have come to rely on. I mean, I do it consistently. I do a nightly review almost every night with my sponsorship family and some of the people I sponsor. But this was the beginning of looking at, where was I at fault? Right. I was a victim. I would like spot it in other people. Oh, they're a victim. They can't own their part in anything. Right. I was so quick to judge other people. But the reality is I played victim a lot. I love being a martyr. Holy crap. I'm so dramatic. Like I just I can just turn everything in to making it about me, even if it's not about me. I survived on, 100, it's a fear, as the book talks about breaking down fear, 1,000 forms of fear, that, that the very fabric of our existence is shot through with it. I had no idea that fear ran my life. I didn't know that underneath every one of these resentments was a fear, that under all this anger and all this disharmony that I had with myself and others, that there was just this underlying current of fear, that every time a defect of mine comes out and I go back into that old self and I react in a defective way, there's fear under there. And there is a distance between me and my higher power. And so the third step was vital. I got to the third step. Like I said, it was 9 years ago. I'm coming up on 9 years since I've had a spiritual awakening. And my sobriety doesn't look anything like it did before. It is, I have moments of peace of mind. I've got contentment. I've got peace. I've got confidence in the future. I believe now in the core of my being that everything's going to be okay. When I used to believe 100% to the core of my being that things were not going to be okay. And that was well into sobriety. And that's the change that I needed. I needed a power in my life. I needed a higher power to restore me to sanity. And nothing like another alcoholic or the, following and taking the directions in the book was able to do that for me. Like I said, I tried all kinds of medications, because my untreated alcoholism looks a lot like manic depression. It looks a lot like anxiety. It looks a lot like depression. And, I think that I need to talk about myself and I need to talk about what you did to me. Like, I was so stuck in that way of thinking. I didn't even know that's who I was. And so this was all new for me, it says on 64, right? It's like you say the third step prayer, you make the decision, like, I have got to find a different way to live. I knew that I had to find a power greater than myself in order to stay sober. And I found that power in AA. I found the group of drunks. I found the good orderly direction. I was physically sober. I was terrified to drink again. I really have always believed that it would get worse. And my own experience proved that, because there were times that I tried to stop on my own, like before God kind of came in and separated me from booze. I would stay stopped, or I'd go to a rehab and I'd come out and I'd have, 3-4 weeks, maybe 2 months of sobriety. And I'd pick up that drink again. And every time I started that terrible cycle again, it got worse. I did more nevers. I made more decisions that puts me in more positions to be hurt. And I lived in a state of continual disturbance. And that was true into my sobriety. When I ended up at that big book retreat, and I had never heard AA package the way that the people that I navigate towards today package AA, like really following the directions in the book, right? I'd never heard AA broken down like that. I had never heard about that the big book was an instruction manual, that it's so important to get step one. And I knew that I had a true step one experience. I knew that I was powerless. I knew that I had the obsession. I knew that when I drank, I couldn't stop. I knew I had the allergy. I had the allergy from the very beginning. I mean, just from the very beginning of getting it in my body. I wanted more and more, and now, and faster and better. And I knew that. But having a power to restore me to sanity, like, I didn't really want to believe in God. like I said, I had some old ideas about God that I never allowed anybody to help me challenge. I never really um, asked myself what did they mean to me. I knew AA was powerful, and I knew that I felt proud to be a part of it, and I wanted to be a part of it, and it did make me feel better that I'd go to a meeting all bunched up inside mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and I'd leave a meeting and somehow I was just a little more untangled. It fixed me, and I knew that it was the best thing that I had going for me, but I couldn't quite bridge um, my where I was in the first two, almost three steps to like having contented sobriety, and that's what 4 through 9 does, and I didn't know that at the time. And when I got to that big book retreat, first of all, I showed up to this big book retreat, no big book, but a car full of bicycles, because I was going to run my bike because I had better things to do at this big book retreat than be at the big book retreat. That's the kind of ego I had, and that's the kind of delusion I lived in. Didn't bring a big book, brought a bunch of bikes. My girlfriend had barely maybe a year and a half of sobriety. I was dating a newcomer. I had sponsored her ex-partner, had a lot of drama and caused a lot of harm getting into that relationship. Thank God she was around some people in AA that were literally about this business the way that I'm understanding it to be about. Like it was her that brought me to some people that had some depth and weight in their message. And I ended up going to the first night of the retreat, fully expecting to go out on bike rides on Saturday and blow most of it off. And that Friday night, I just hearing this man like talk about the first 3 steps, I was convicted. This guy was throwing me a life preserver, and I knew I'd been drowning a long time in my sea of self-centeredness, and my sea of self-reliance. I don't think I could really put into words just how awful I felt emotionally. I had no power in my life, and I was just trying so hard, grasping at all those defects and all those things that used to kind of work, right? Buy another bike, get another tattoo, get a new girlfriend, move, sell the next job, make a bunch of money, have some sex, like all the things that I had done in my sobriety to fix me, like they were out. I wanted to have a real relationship with someone. I wanted to be a person among people at work. I didn't want to have to like puff up around people because I desperately needed them to like me. And if they didn't like me enough, I needed to punish them in some way. I didn't even know that I had that in me, that I was punishing it. It took me going into this work, which I will promise I'm going to get to here in a few seconds. But I heard it. I heard the message of depth and weight. I heard the power of God talking through this man at this retreat. And I did not go on bike rides Saturday and Sunday. I sat my butt in that chair and I hung on to every single word that man was saying. And I wanted what he had, and I wanted what some of the people in the room had, more than I wanted anything else in the world. I wanted a new life. I wanted a new sobriety. And I think that's when I really came to the 3rd and the 7th step, like a true surrender, like, on my knees, like, God, please change me. Up until this point, I had all these ideas about God, right? I didn't think that God could love me. I thought that I was so special and so broken. Every single speaker tonight talked about holding hands with the man, saying the 3rd step prayer, or thinking they were gay. All 3 the guys that spoke said something about, questioning their sexuality. I knew I was gay when I was in 2nd grade. And it was something that I used to beg God in my nightly prayers, please, God, please change me. Please. I don't want to be gay. I don't want to be gay. And I'd never considered that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong, that maybe God could love a gay person too. Right. And I know that sounds so dramatic, but the truth is I really was tortured by the fact that I was different in that way. I didn't like that about myself. I didn't want to be different, but then there was a part of me that needed to be different. I love how Clancy says it. He says, you need to treat me special. Like, I need to be treated special just to feel average. And if you treat me average, I feel like you're rejecting me. Like that's the level of self-centeredness that I existed in. And when God didn't take that from me, it was a heterosexual white male in Alcoholics Anonymous that ended up becoming my sponsor. And I picked him up at that retreat. because I shit you not, I'm on my knees in this retreat cabin, and it's Sunday and it's almost over, and I do not want to go back to the person I've always been. I know that, like, I have tapped into something at this retreat. I had tapped into some power and some direction, and I knew I needed more of it, and I wanted more of it. And I got on my knees and I cried and begged God to change me. I don't know what it was about Brian, straight guy, whatever, but I don't know. He just gave me permission to, like, kind of meet God alone, which I did in that room. And I asked God to change me, and to help me and to fix me. Whatever you got to do with me, I don't care what you do. That's the place I was at. And that was very similar to the place I was in my physical surrender from booze. It was, okay, God, if I need to be a heterosexual, teach Sunday school at my mom's church, marry man, have a bunch of kids, like, if I need to do that in order to stop living in this abandoned house and drinking and drugging the way I was, I'm willing to do that. And what I found in here was that, obviously I was welcome in AA, and I was welcome to stay sober. But what I found at 17 years sober was that I was really welcome, and I really did belong. And I didn't know that. And I didn't believe that. And so on that prayer, I felt God say to me, and I did have a little Bill Wilson white light experience. It was just all emotional. It was like, ask that guy to sponsor you. And it was one of the guys at the retreat that was, like, sponsored a lot of the guys there. And I felt like he knew how to do AA. I felt like I could trust that he knew how to work the steps. And I literally had never I had never worked any steps. I had not made any amends in 17 years. I didn't really know what my character defects were. I didn't know how I set the ball rolling in every dramatic episode of my life. I didn't know how my life was my fault. I didn't believe that. I thought I was still the victim of circumstance. Not that I started the circumstances in a lot of cases, or added to them in some way. I didn't know any of the stuff that I know now. And God literally was like, ask that guy to sponsor you. And he was like the straightest white guy. He wears khaki pants and a suit and a tie. I mean, he's just not the kind of guy I would have ever hung out with. Right. And he was the man that I felt like God was sending me to. And listen, I'm going to tell you that man, I got alone with him that day. We were walking to the last moment of the retreat, last hour or so. And I'm so scared. And I said, I just got up from this prayer. So I had this, like, push, this, like, power behind me. And I said, do you ever sponsor women? And he looked at me real fast and he said, well, yeah, lesbian women. And right there, all that BS that I believed about, I can't be in AA with people that are sober and real sober, whatever. I can't have a guy, whatever I believed, all that was smashed right there just by his answer. Well, yeah, I'll sponsor a lesbian, no problem. I'll sponsor straight women, but sure. And I just was like, God, I'm so wrong. I had no idea how wrong I was. I just did not know how wrong I was and how much BS I believed. I grew up as an only child, and I literally believed everything I thought. And I didn't bounce it off of people. That was not part of my thing. I was alone. So I lived in my head and what I thought I believed. And what AA has done, and what this step has started to do was I started to take a fact-finding, a fact-facing experience. It was literally just following some simple directions, which is very hard for somebody like me. I do not like to listen. Even when I try, I go to group fitness classes now, and I will literally try to listen to what the trainer is telling me to do, and I will still go rogue and do my own thing. So writing this inventory was hard. I had to constantly open the book and say, okay, I'm only writing the first column, right? I knew I was full of resentments, guys. Like, oh God, I was resentful still to this day, I am a resentment making machine. I mean, if I am not, like, carefully being connected with other drunks, like I said, I do the nightly review at night, which is, mini kind of touch up of the day. Right. And if I'm not putting that stuff out there and taking spiritual action, it will eat my lunch, and I will get so sick and so blocked from God. But my first one it was huge. It was being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us. We considered its common manifestations, resentment. So the picture on 65 is 3 columns, right? And it tells us to write it down. Mr. Brown, which whoever wrote this, I really appreciated this guy. Like, he had the same kind of crazy I had. Even though it was written in 1935, I could see this drama. Told my wife of my mistress. Yep, I'd be upset too. Brown might get my job. I mean, he's hitting pocketbook. He's hitting self-esteem, sex relations. Mr. Brown's flirting with his wife, possibly. Mrs. Jones, the employer, all threatens to fire me for drinking and padding my expense account. Like, yes, that's the kind of person I was. I would steal your tools. This is the kind of thing I was before I even started drinking. At 10 years old, I'm stealing the construction site tools from the vacant house that they're building. I'm going in on the weekends and taking their nails and hammers and wood. And I built a tree house in the woods. And that's where I like to hang out. And I was so angry that those men got in my tree house and stole their tools back. Like, that's the kind of indignation that I have and delusion. Right. And so I was able to write the 3-column inventory. Right. And I was able to see, on the first 3 columns, to conclude that the first 3 columns are just about other people. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us, so we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, then we were sore at ourselves, but the more we fought and tried to have matters our own way, the worse matters got. And that is true always, for in this experience and forevermore. That the more I fight and try to have things my own way, the worse they get. I'm a pusher. I'm a bully at life. I want to push and I want to get what I think I need. Right. And I started to see this pattern emerging in writing these first 3 columns. But it wasn't until down here on the bottom of 66 where it starts to describe the 4th column in the 4th step, which I did not know existed. And it says, we turned back to the list, for it held the key to the future. The list is the first 3 columns. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We begin to see that the world and its people really dominated us, and that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. Fancied, meaning made up, may not have even happened. It's just my perception of things. We saw these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick, though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. Here's the sick man prayer. We ask God to help show them the same patience, tolerance, pity, patience we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. So this is leading me up to write in the 4th column. I still have no power to change the way I feel about these resentments on the first 3 columns. I got no power, but it's telling me to pray. It's telling me to ask. So I have been taught to say on my 4th column, on my first column, is to pray for each of those people. And my sponsor told me my most current experience with the 4th and 5th step was that I had to pray for 2 weeks on each of the people on my resentment list. I had to pray the sick man prayer for them and to ask God to help me see what my part was, and I started to understand that, like, of myself, I only see so much. I only see I can only see the tip, the head of the hammer, the head of the nail as it's in the wood. I don't know that there's 2 inches or 4 inches. There's so much in there that's attaching this wood, right? These 2 pieces of wood together. And without God's help, I don't have the power to see my part. I just don't. So I was told to pause. I was supposed to write the 1st column, the 2nd column, the 3rd column, and stop. And I was supposed to go back and pray for those people. And I did not like that assignment. I was supposed to do it for 2 weeks. And it probably took me 3 months to finally get through it. And this is 21 years sober at this point when I'm doing this work with this sponsor in this way. I had a really hard time following that direction, even though I wanted the freedom, right? It says, we avoid retaliation or argument. This is on 67. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to make a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. Referring to our list, putting out of the minds the wrong others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. To ask myself these things: where had I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened? So I was then to go back into those first 3, pray on them, ask God to reveal to me what I'm supposed to see, and then write the 4th column after asking myself, okay, in this situation with this person, where was I selfish? Where was I dishonest? Where was I self-seeking? Where was I frightened? And I don't know about you guys, but I can only see so much on my own. Like I just don't have the power to fix myself. Like I don't have the power to change myself. But taking that action kind of opened it up, right? I started to soften the blow of the stinging of the resentment. And I started to be able to see that, like, holy crap, wow, I selfishly hired that person because they were cheap. I was dishonest, because I didn't offer to pay her more. I was self-seeking because I wanted what I wanted. I was frightened because I didn't think I could afford it. Right. Like I started to ask myself those questions about these resentments, and I started to see my part in every single one of these things. Right. Um, and, and when I read that stuff, this is just the resentment part, right? The 65 to 67 is just the resentments. And I read them to my sponsor, and I was kind of grossed out. I wasn't relieved. I didn't feel like really good about myself. Like I could really see how selfishness, how my self-reliance caused so many problems in my life. And my fear of financial, all the fear, right? And fear is a whole nother column, right? That's the next direction, was to like look at our fears, right? It was an evil and corroding thread. The very fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. It says on 68, the directions. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. Even though we had no resentment in connection with them, we asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. So I was to write down fears. Page, top of the page, bottom of the page, just write. I'm afraid of the dark. I'm afraid of certain ethnic groups. I'm afraid of people who listen to this kind of music. I mean, I have some weird fears. I am afraid of, like, I had a resentment against litter, for instance. Like, I get really incensed when I see people throwing trash out of their car, or when I go outside of my building and there's trash. I used to get so angry at that. And somebody challenged me to take inventory of why litter bothered me so much. Why was I so angry at trash? I mean, besides the fact that it's unsightly, but underneath it all, I discovered that, like, if I live around people that throw their trash on the ground, the self-centeredness in that is that I don't think I can do better. I don't think I can afford to live in a nicer place. Like, there's something wrong with me because, I live in a place where people litter. Like, it's always self-centered. It is always some selfish, there's always a selfish spin on it. Right. And the same thing with my fears. It asks us to, why did we have these fears? Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Well, of course. I'm afraid of the IRS. I'm afraid of the money. I'm afraid of having work. I'm afraid of not having work. I'm afraid of having too much work and not enough work. I'm afraid of, my partner leaving me. I'm afraid of people quitting and working for the competitor. All the things. Like, I just wrote, it was so easy for me to write the fear list. It just flowed out of me. There were so many things. But I'm supposed to ask myself, and I didn't see that for years. I didn't see, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? So, and how am I not relying on God if I'm relying on these fears? Right. And man, that was intense to be like, oh, there's a connection between my level of fear and my trust in God, and my third step decision. Right. When I am completely trusting and relying on my higher power, and I feel that warmness in my belly, when I've done the right work, when I've prayed correctly, when I've brought that stuff to God, when I've said, hey, God, and my prayers in the morning are like that. God, I'm scared about this client. They're unhappy. I want to get them happy. My primary purpose is to serve this client and this designer. Like, help me have a good attitude about this. Give me the power to face life, to face this life. I bring these fears into prayer today. And I've developed a relationship with God through this action, but it took some time, because the fifth step was really where I realized I was not unique, man. I realized I was just like everybody else in here. It was awesome. It was one of the most freeing experiences of my life to have, and I've had it every time I've ever done an inventory with the person hearing it, I always felt like they loved me more after they heard my stuff, that they could relate, and that's really that's the best part about AA is like, it's our defects that bond us. It's not our assets, it's the pain, that we can feel and relate to, that is where God seems to come in. Sex was a big one for me. That's the next part of the 4th step inventory. Some of the most powerful work I've ever done was in the sex inventory, because that is where I knew I was selfish. God, man, it was powerful. Dave started to sponsor me. I'm checking the time. Good. Dave started to sponsor me. We get through the 4th step. I had done the 4 columns. It took me 4 appointments to read them all to him. We had that 5th step experience where I felt like I knew I was on the right path. I knew this man had heard it all before. He even told me, he compared me some of the people other guys he sponsored, and our defects were similar. And I was like, this makes so much sense. I would have never thought you, Mr. living on the water in Annapolis with khaki pants guy, would be a dog like I was, like we had a lot of the same defects. It was really a relief to me. It was a big relief. It was a big turning point. And I'm doing all right. I'm going about my life, and I find myself single, and I start dating again. And almost instantly, I started to, I was going to do it right this time. Right now I'm sober. I've had some spiritual experiences. I'm making amends. I want to be sane and healthy in the form of sex, right? In the place of sex. So I came up with a dating ideal. This is what it's going to look like. Like, I'm not going to sleep with anybody. That's always a problem. I'm going to just try to like have dinner and have conversation, right? I had all these parameters around it, and I tried really hard on my own power. But I really wasn't clear about my sex conduct until what happened next, which was there was a woman in my home group. When I started dating, my personality started changing. My ego's getting kicked up. I'm finding out I'm attractive. People are, I'm dating. That's becoming a primary purpose. And this woman could spot that in me. And she said, I think you need to do another sex inventory. She's like, I'm a dog, and I'm pretty sure you're a dog. And I think you need to do some more work on your sex inventory. And I remember my first thought was, I just did a 5th step. Like, I just did this work. Who are you? Second thought was, oh, she's probably kinky. Like, she just wants to hear my sex inventory, all grandiose. And the third thought, maybe the 3rd or 4th thought after being defensive was, really, if I'm in the solution following business, the suggestion following business, like, how bad's it going to hurt to read this, to do another sex inventory? Because this woman who has more time than me spots something and thinks I should. So let me try it. And I'm telling you, it was the most powerful piece of work I've ever done, because I didn't know up until this point. Then on page 69, there was these questions, these vital questions about myself and my relationship with sex, and most of the bad blood that I had in my life, most of the, good 80% of the amends I had to make were the result of a sex relation that had gone bad. Some sort of relationship that I was in, where I had hurt somebody, and so an entire group of their friends hated my guts. Or, I had a lot of bad blood. I was not able to be faithful. Like I told you about my sobriety, it was not spiritual. It was not good sobriety, right? It was terrible. I had a terrible reputation in AA, and I deserved it. I was super, super toxic. Nothing had changed about me. So I still couldn't be faithful. I didn't have a higher power. Like, I was not sponsorable. And she asked me to do this work. And I literally didn't know this was here. She said, turn to page 69. There are 4 questions. I want you to answer those 4 questions with everybody you've ever had sex with. And when I sat down to do it, I was like, this is so stupid. This is not going to work. This is just silly. And I really said that out loud. And thankfully I had a newcomer I had let her move in with me for about a year. She was hurt herself and had a wheelchair. And I have my house is set up so a person like that could be comfortable, and I let her stay with me. And she was there, And she heard me saying that, and she grabbed her big book, and this girl has maybe 4 years now, maybe 6. And she turned it to the page and she was like, these questions, just do it. Just do it. Don't think about it. Just do it. And I was blocked because that's my natural state, is to be closed and blocked, and I got it. And don't tell me what to do. And um, but for some reason, when Sam said it, I just did it. I wrote Brian Jones's name down, and then I looked at where had I been selfish. Well, I only came out and snuck out of the house and hung out with him if he brought me alcohol or drugs. Um, that was selfish. I only hung out with him if there was something in it for me. That was selfish. Where was I dishonest? Well, I didn't really care about him, and he was totally in love with me, and I was super gay and super not interested. But we were buddies and whatever. Sometimes we would whatever. But I knew he loved me. Was I inconsiderate? Yes, I was inconsiderate. Who did I hurt? Well, I hurt Brian. I hurt his brother. I hurt his brother's girlfriend. I hurt his best friend. I hurt, there was a whole lot of people that I hurt off of just that relationship with Brian. Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Every single one of my sex relations, the answer was yes. Because if you weren't jealous, suspicious, or bitter of me, I did not believe that you liked me. Like I needed that kind of drama in all my relationships. The magic piece was, we got this. Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. Well, as I flipped the page, and there was many, many, many pages, somewhere in 20, 30 pages into these people that I could remember that I had had sex with. I got it down. I started to see this thing emerge that said, what should we have done instead? And in almost every case, it was, I should have not done it. I should have waited for God to bring me the appropriate person. I should have waited until I was out of a relationship. There was a million things that I could have done instead. And that's where the freedom really started to come for me, was like, wow, again, it's like me thoughtlessly, pursuing people who were inappropriate for me, or I was doing things that were super inappropriate for me because I thought I needed to do this to get what I wanted. Always this angle of self underneath it all. And it was really painful, and I caused a lot of harm. And I read the inventory to Lori, and she had me go back and do a little bit more writing, how do you treat women? Like, she had me do some other stuff that she had done, and I did those things. And then she asked me to write a sex ideal. And I made up this, which is on the paragraph underneath it. It says, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We ask God to mold our ideals and help us to live up to them. We remember that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. And it says in meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. And so I was told to make a list of all the things that I was looking for in a partner, because it came to me, it started to come up that I was really, truly monogamous. I actually wanted to be monogamous, even though there was this part of my ego that really wanted to have multiple partners all the time, right? And all the drama that comes with that, right? But truly underneath it all, I really wanted to be the kind of person that you could hang your hat on, like the kind of person that could be trusted. I really wanted to be a partner with a partner. I wanted to, and there was all these things. I wrote, a page and a half of these things, and I read them all to Lori. And it was almost instantly that, am I out of time? I did? Okay, well, I'm done. Thanks for letting me talk.